Hello, everybody out there in podcast land. Welcome to the Sense and Signal podcast. And this is a podcast about leadership and sense making. How do leaders of organizations or teams or groups make sense of the world in order to make decisions about how to act? And so we're going to be exploring sense making and all its different dimensions in this podcast, especially how it relates to leadership. And I'm one of the co-hosts of this podcast, Daniel Tarker, and I am here with
Jodah Jensen, the other co-host. Hey, good evening, everybody, or good morning.
Yeah, good whatever time you're watching this.
Yeah.
And so the theme of this, our second episode, and we are, launching this and trying to figure our way around this field of podcasting. The second episode is the theme is we don't need no stinking research.
Say it, Dan. Just say it.
This is Jodah's idea. It's not my idea. This is Jodah's idea. So Jodah's going to lead us through this conversation because I might have a different opinion. I might think we do need some stinking research. But Jodah, why don't you kick it off and get us started with this conversation about whether or not we need research or not?
All right. I would say the subtitle would be "Or everything is research." So we'll just go with that.
There you go.
We'll go with that. Yeah, Dan. So you and I have been talking about this for a little bit, and this is a subject matter that kind of is near and dear to me on some level. We both know that.
And maybe it would help the audience to know why it's near and dear to you, but if you explain what you do.
Okay. Yeah. Because I'm not famous yet, so they don't know who I am.
No.
Yeah.
No, I know who you are, but
yeah, true. Give it a week. Right.
This will go viral.
Yeah, it'll go viral super quick. So I am a product designer of 20 years. When I say product designer, for those who are in the technical industry, a product designer of digital media, digital products in the silicon space. I've wore many hats in that design field, from architect to UI designer to visual designer to even some engineering in my lifetime. And so I've been on the forefront of product development. I've been working on the latest trends of how to kind of get products out the door. I maintain sort of my knowledge, or I try to maintain a contemporary knowledge of how things are being done today. And at the same time, I keep my foot in the waters of the past, because so much of what is old is new, and we just tend to forget things, or we get lost because the books are out of print. So, I try. So I kind of think of myself as a study and a student of organization and how to move product. And I think product could be anything, just moving, making sure your organization is productive. So how does that sound, Dan? Does that seem?
That sounds great. I feel like I know you even better than I knew you a minute ago.
Yeah, well, right. And you don't even really know me that well at all. We met just last week, so it's kind of weird. Yeah. Weird. So one of the things that I've noticed, and my synopsis, Dan, is that in the product development process, there's a lot, when you have a healthy product environment, you'll have some form of research, and you'll oftentimes have like a research department or somebody dedicated to research. And when we're talking about research, we're talking about a formal research process, right? Right. And that will exist. And let me rephrase that. I won't say in a healthy environment, but in a rigorous environment, we'll say. They'll decide that they actually want dedicated research, and that will occur. And what I have noticed, I feel, is that it becomes a bit of a checkbox at times on the research level, in the sense that they'll have the research and they'll point their fingers in directions for research to go. But it is where it falls short is in the alignment of what the business needs to understand at that moment, or maybe even in the future. That the discussions, the two sort of mindsets, the business and what they don't know, and so then where do they point their arrows, head their boats or their research boats or whatever. Those conversations tend to fall down. So that's sort of the scope of this conversation, right? And so why do I say you don't need research when I say that? What am I talking about? or subtext, everything is research. So, Dan. First thing, I kind of want to put a break on no research. I mentioned this before. I like this terminology called ABCD, right? Which is basically always be collecting data. So, does one consider collecting data to be research in a formal way, right? I mean, because you're trying to take in information, and then and Jan, as you corrected me the other day, you're trying to formulate knowledge. You're trying to extrapolate this data, this information, and generate knowledge. And
I think since you're bringing it up, I think it's good for maybe the audience to like define what knowledge is.
Go for it. Because I don't know what it is.
So, I mean,
I don't know what it is.
And this is not my idea. I mean, this comes from research too. That, there's data, there's information, and it's the process of making sense of that information that produces knowledge, right? So you have data, you have the numbers, you have maybe qualitative data. It's just data. It's just sitting there. It's not really knowledge until you've digested it, thought about it, made sense of it, applied it to frameworks, applied it to understanding reality. That's the point at which it becomes knowledge.
I like that. And where you're saying frameworks in this sense, like these mental models. So you have a schema that as you would say, and that should be filling in that schema or breaking it down one way or the other. But it's a mechanism.
Yeah, that would be called sense breaking, right? When
exactly
as you start to accrue some knowledge about something and it doesn't conform to the schemas you have formed about that topic, that's sense breaking. That's when you're like, oh wow, that wasn't what I expected. And for the audience, schema is kind of an idea around a mental map that we form in our minds to engage with the world. So it happens from the time we're in infancy. We engage with the world by reaching out to like our mom or crying, and that produces a result. So that becomes a schema like, oh, if I do this, this is how the environment will respond, right? And so we build these schemas throughout life as kind of shorthand for how to behave in the world, because if we didn't have those shorthand schemas, life would be too difficult to operate within. The world would be. So they're kind of shorthand mental maps in our minds.
And I'll use model, Dan, just so you know, interchangeably between knowledge and model, and to some degree.
Okay.
Just because I think that actually lends to my point. And so so businesses and organizations, they got projects that they do, and they have to make decisions on those projects. They can be large, they can small. And going back to what Dan was just saying, we've got these mental models, these schemas. And the question is, when you're about to move forward on a project, do you have a complete and validated enough schema or mental model? Do you have the knowledge to execute without having to know anything else, right? Can you do that? Like, I don't need to know any more information other than I know where my coffee is and I have my hand to pick it up. I don't need to do any research for that. Dan would suggest otherwise. He thinks I can't do that, but I'm telling you, I can do that without
kind of groping around. Where's that coffee cup? How do I lift it up? Pour it on my head.
He's bore witness. So unfortunately, yes. But and that's true in a business sense. You don't always need your model might be sufficient for it to move forward, right? But the question is, how do you know when? How do you know if you model? Because what do the knowns, the unknown knowns, the known unknowns, and so that's you've got all that going on for you. So I'm going to say I'm going to break making a decision down in 4 categories. And Dan, we can talk about each 4 categories to some degree. We've already spoken a bit about the first, and that's knowledge and a model. When you're about to move forward with a project or some sort of effort in your company that requires significant amount of energy, do you have sufficient knowledge to move forward without, or are you deficient in knowledge, or is your model not accurate, right? Do you understand your goals? Do you understand the distinctions, the systems, the relationships, the project effort? Do you understand the risks, right? That's one. Second one is the size of the project, something to take in consideration. How big is the project, right? Even if you might not have enough knowledge, if the project is super small, again, I don't exactly know where my coffee cup is because it's kind of early in the morning. My eyes are fully open. I do a couple of gropes. I miss a couple of times, but I find it, spill a little bit of coffee, clean it up. No big deal. I got my coffee on time, right? So no big deal.
And this is him every
This
morning.
is me every morning. Again, he's observed. The next one would be your risk appetite, right? How much, like, what are you willing to take on? What dangers are you willing to endeavor? I am not going to jump out of a plane. There are plenty of people who will. The odds of me surviving jumping out of a plane with a parachute, very good. But it's the severity of outcome is enough for me to say I don't want to take that risk. And really, I do want to make a distinction. Taking on the chance of something happening and the severity of that outcome. Those are two things. And we as humans tend to conflate those two very much. Being afraid to fly is, I would argue, a conflation of severity of outcome versus chance of outcome, right? So that's something you have to think about as well. And then the fourth thing, and this is Jodah's list, it's not some official universal list. The fourth thing is the scale of research and your effort. If you do decide that you need research, it could be, let me rephrase this. Scale could be 0 to whatever maximum you're capable of doing, right? No research to everything. But what is the scale? Because, again, going back to my coffee thing, if I know exactly where my coffee is, I see there's a cup of coffee in there, am I going to call Dan to do some $1,000 research to identify where my coffee is? No, because I see it, right? So it's really important that we address that notion as well. I'm gonna stop there. Dan, do you dare challenge me on any of these things, or is this the Royal Rumble?
It says the Royal Rumble. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad, and for the audience, this is the second or third time we've recorded this podcast. We've been working through technical issues.
Tons of technical.
And sense making with podcasting technology. So I want to clarify a couple things. One thing we talked about in a previous attempt to record this was research mindset, right? And I think you're speaking to that in the subtitle of this new iteration of our episode, right? That as an organizational leader or project manager, you can approach it with a research mindset. And research, can be on a continuum. And you're kind of providing a very interesting framework to think about research in that way too. But on a basic level, I think you could think of research on a continuum from like a program review or program assessment, which might not, and maybe even just pulse taking, at the very most basic end of the spectrum. It's just like, what kind of email responses are you getting to a product or program? What kind of things are you hearing through the grapevine? What are people sharing with you, right? So that's all very informal, kind of pulse-taking level of research, but you're still collecting data and you want to be attentive to that because they're signals, right? That's what we're talking about as part of this podcast. They're things you might go, oh, I heard this thing. I might need to dig deeper into it. And then you got maybe more formal levels of research where you do surveys and focus groups, but they still don't have to meet the rigor of like a research article, or a dissertation level of research. So, but you still want to have a method to how you're doing it so that you're making sure that you're not wasting your time, that you're collecting good data, and that, there's that cost versus return there because you don't want to waste one of the things I hear you talking about is not wanting to waste time because that's a valuable resource. That's money, that's people's effort, and that's people's feeling about their work. If they spend time on a project that leads nowhere, no one feels good about that. So, making sure that you have good methods in place so that you're going to get the data that you can use. And then at the very extreme is, a graduate level dissertation type research where you're doing, the methods have to be so rigorous that, because you're going to be publishing on it and it's going to be scrutinized very heavily. So you have to think about all that when you're deciding where I'm going into research or how I'm going to approach the research project that I want to tackle. And to your point, what I think I hear you saying is on this scale, this framework that you're cultivating is, there's multiple factors. One is how the scale of the project and how important is it for me to engage in research? Is it something very basic, like I already have the expertise and the cognitive schemas in place to make sense of this very simple problem. But is it getting to a level of more complexity? Am I losing confidence in my ability to understand the problem I'm facing, which would signal, hey, I need to do more research? And then the other variable that I hear you talking about is risk versus reward, right? Like, is there a risk to me wasting money on this research, or conversely, not doing the research and then paying the consequences of that because a competitor gets ahead of me because I haven't done my homework, right? So I see multiple variables happening within your framework. Is that
You've nailed it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's because we recorded
yes,
this.
Yes, it is.
Three times.
We've spoken to this ad nauseum together, even offline. Yeah, no, that's right though. And the thing is, like, research isn't free, right? It takes money, people, time, and then we are talking, and it's a fuzzy. It gets fuzzy at the edges, but to your point, we are talking about. I am referring specifically to formal research, but even that's fuzzy. Even that, because what is, when you're at some smaller level of research, what is formal research? Because to your point, yes, A, B, C, D. Always be collecting data. Have your raters out. Whatever action you're going to do, you should at least have that feedback loop to see if what kind of signals you're getting from that effort. But yes, and it is important, especially that risk versus reward versus you can actually say in an effort that the cost of failure is cheaper than the research, right? So if you actually do research,
I guess it'll depend on the circumstances.
no, I'm just saying
right?
One can say that, and rarely do I hear that said.
As a universal, could someone say that? Or
No. I'm just saying, under certain circumstances, the cost of failure can be cheaper than the research done. Right.
Okay.
So again, going back to my stupid coffee analogies, right? If I was served a cup of coffee and someone makes a comment. Or someone says, hey, that coffee is a dark roast and I only like medium roast and I don't want to taste it. And I say, hey, Dan, please, can you do some analysis, some quants and some qualitative analysis on this? Let me know what kind of roast this is. And you come back and charge me $500. Or I could have tasted it, failed because it was a dark roast. I didn't like it. Get another cup of coffee for free and have that one moment. So the price was not commensurate of research was not commensurate with the outcome of the failure. So companies and organizations need to take that into consideration. What are the costs of failing? And then what are the costs of succeeding? And then what kind of the costs of the research and the type of research that you want to understand. And I think that when I say you don't need research, you actually kind of just said just now, you have a mental model oftentimes in your expertise in your and in your area, and there can be projects that you are executing on that are of a certain scope, of a certain time period, that will a certain effort level, right? Balanced with the knowledge that you know, balanced with the risk appetite you're willing to take on. Where you're saying, you know what, it's actually, I'd rather not spend my research dollars on this thing, even though I'm not 100% knowledgeable or I'm 100% confident, but I'm going to leverage this effort as the research, right? We're going back to that. So you're technically not doing research, but you're not doing forward research. You're doing back end research. You're after the fact, right? You're going to let that thing, but you say, I'm going to let this lead the way. It could fail. That's okay. Because I'm actually going to now pivot my research that I need over in this area that actually has more important issues, right? So, case in point. Again, we've gone over it. Whoop, I'm coming off the camera there. Should I just talk this way so you can just see my shoulder?
That's a lot better.
Yeah, I think the audience will appreciate this. I'll just let my shoulder do the talking. So I'll put a little smiley face right here.
There you go.
So case in point, so like I said, I'm worked in design for interfaces and experiences for software for years. And I'm not going to say this is a specific story, but it is illustrative of the story, where one could be sitting, you could be building a new product, and you're trying to get people to just simply try your product for the first time, and you're failing at that. And then internally, you're working on the interface, and you all of a sudden you have this person who puts a button someplace, and then another group of people look at that button and go, actually, it should be over here. And then you have another group of people that says, actually, it should be over here. And there are multiple reasons why this happens. It's not just because of indifferent or indecision amongst the group. It's power structures as well. But what I'm saying is what can happen sometimes is that you'll go, okay, well, let's preference test this. You're going to go spend $1,000 on a preference test when you aren't even getting people into your system. If you have people having issues with your button when you can't even get people into your product, then you have a rich man's problem at that point in time, because this is not a problem right now because no one's touching the button. So from my point of view, let's one make a decision, put the button someplace, save that $1,000, take that $1,000 and put it back onto the research to understand why people are not coming into your product. Because unless people get into your product, you're going out of business, and you've just been moving sticks around that no one was going to play with. So that's my point. You don't need research.
Yeah. No, and I think that's true, what you're saying. I mean, it sounds like what I hear you saying is more consideration needs to be made toward prioritizing where research dollars need to go when you're working on a project. Does it need to go to figure out if that button's in the right place when there's plenty of research already indicating that it probably is in the right place?
Or even if it's not.
And that's why you hire experts.
Even if it's not. And I didn't bring that up. And that's the other point. There are plenty of historical researches around projects around this kind of knowledge base, and I'm sure other knowledge bases in education and in healthcare. You start there, leverage that. It might be a sufficient amount of information for you to make a sufficient first step without having to, because again, make sure if you do have a research budget, make sure that research budget is in the right spot, and you're not having it toil over, again, problems that aren't problems yet, or you're trying to satisfy a group's inability to make decisions, or you're just not having an alignment around your business needs, and you're just letting the researchers make assessments on their own and trying to do their damnedest to figure it out without any communication. You can have all this research going on, and it doesn't really mean anything for you guys. So, so an interesting topic where we're talking about doing better research. When we start off, you don't need research, but I do want to bring that back. That I do say, sometimes, again, what are your 4 parts? What do you know? Your knowledge, your mental model, how much of the knowledge you have, the size of the project, what's your risk appetite, and what's the cost of your research. All those things come together to make you decide how to move forward. If you're very confident in your knowledge, the size of the project is sufficient enough that you can take a risk against your risk appetite, then you actually don't need research. But that project itself should be the research. Never stop. Always A, B, C, D. Always be collecting data. So that's my thesis, Dan.
No, and I agree with that, and I think there's this model called the Kuhneven model. It's a sense making model where you kind of categorize problems based on whether it's a simple problem, a complicated problem, complex, or if it's chaotic, right? And there's also the space in the middle of that model where you're not certain where you're at. And to your point, I mean, a simple problem, we know like how to pick up a cup of coffee without burning yourself, to use your coffee analogy. It's a simple problem. You don't need to bring in research to solve that problem. When you get to complicated, maybe you start to bring in some experts, but the key word there is experts, people who've developed those cognitive schemas that we've already talked about to make sense of something very quickly because they have been immersed in the field or this area, and they can provide the knowledge. So, your research is really just consulting the experts. You don't have to research too much because you have them as far as going through a method and collecting data. But then you get into the complex realm, and you want to probe. Right, you want to start doing research because complexity, it's hard to disentangle all the variables that are impacting a certain problem that you're wrestling with. And so, you want to do like no fault, well, not no fault, but free to fail tests or free to fail probes and see what works and what doesn't work. And to your point, I think within that framework and that theory, those probes are research, right? You're seeing if that, to your, product focus, that proof of concept is going to work. I didn't really introduce what I do, but I work in higher education, and I have my doctorate in organizational leadership and work at a college. So I'm more program focused than product focused. So I guess a program is kind of a product, but same thing. When I pilot a program, I kind of run it small scale as a test, see what the results are. It's not a big research project, but we're looking at the data, always collecting the data, as you say, and paying attention to it and using that as to decide whether it's helping us have the impact, in my case, on student success, that we want it to have.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I haven't tested this. I haven't done the research. I think this sort of thinking needs to happen just on a project level basis, right? This is a mental model unto itself, right? How to get and we're talking about sense and signals, right? What are your senses telling you? What do you know? What kind of signals are you getting? What kind of signals do you need to have? Do you know if you're getting all the signals or not? And when you're going to make decisions on a project and move forward with them, these are the kinds of calculuses that you've got to make. And again, it's tough. You're barraged with so much stuff. You've got pressures from leadership, pressures from your peers, pressures from you got to get it done. So it's easy to take shortcuts, and oftentimes you will have to take shortcuts, But if you can kind of set these things up ahead of time, delineate these problems into the pieces ahead of time, it really will facilitate your efforts and help you move faster. And just simply saying, I acknowledge that I need to know the scope of this project, but I don't know the scope of this project, but we need to move forward. You can now put that down as a risk. You can now communicate that to your peers, to your bosses, to your leadership. What's the risk? We're not sure the scope. We haven't had time, but we know this and we know this and we know this. So just acknowledging those pieces helps communicate the what's going on as you move forward with your projects.
Yeah, I think risk is an important factor because some people are more risk averse than others. I tend to be to a degree, not risk averse, with projects and stuff like that, more freewheeling, Captain Kirk style. But there are other people who, want a lot of data before they make a decision about how to proceed. So it does matter. The temperament of the leadership matters in this case. It does.
And you too, and how you sell it. So in software, there's a thing called, and this a lot of people in software will know this, a thing called Agile Development. And someone actually asked me, what does Agile Development mean to me? I felt like a job interview because I couldn't come up with the answer. And that's often the way it works for me in job interviews. But it's
because he hasn't had his coffee.
I haven't had my coffee. I can't find it. Where is it?
Just coffee. What's Agile? If I knew Agile, I'd have my coffee.
Well, actually, we can stick with that stupid analogy if you want. I can use it for this. But Agile is a method by which allows you to fail, and this is a software thing,
Right.
But
it's permeated through other industries.
Okay, yeah, and it's about failing fast, and getting and collecting those signals and those senses right away. So Dan, maybe I don't know how you feel about this, and I think we've talked about this, maybe, and that is, the scientific method isn't. There's a lot of things to the scientific method, but really, I will go so far that the scientific method really revolves around the ability to sense. So much of a study is about finding the right experiment to collect data. They spend years structuring an experiment to understand something, and of course, not everything needs to be that way. Some things can just be simply a questionnaire. But even within that questionnaire, how you ask questions can affect your sense, what the signals you're getting. And I don't want to. I think that's a whole other show we could talk about. But my point being, my point is that with Agile Development, it's about doing things fast and furious with a little bit of information and getting basically small tests out there quickly and getting feedback immediately. You don't know everything. You admittedly don't know anything, but it's okay because you're doing small experiments continuously, quickly.
And those decrease the risk because they're small, right?
Remember, you're decreasing the severity of outcome. The risk is exactly the same. But I'm being, some might argue my definitions here, but I read a book that has separated those two. So risks of failure haven't changed necessarily, right? But the severity of the outcome of that risk is, if they hate it, well, all you've done is lost a little bit of money as to millions of dollars.
Right. Okay. So the severity of the risk is diminished. Okay. And that's valuable too.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're probably coming to the end of this episode. I think it would be interesting to talk more about the philosophical aspects of research as we move forward in our conversations. As humans, I think one of the important things to remember is, as human beings, we're terrible sense makers. And to your point, we have these senses: our eyes, ears, nose, taste, feelings, and they are not equipped to capture all of reality. I mean, I think cognitive science and neurology is teaching us that we're not seeing all of reality. We're seeing what we have adapted through evolution to be able to perceive in order to survive and procreate, right? And help evolution along with its mission.
Were we supposed to smoke pot before this? I don't remember that one.
I took some acid,
okay, well, warn me next time so I can be on the same wave.
I will. All
right. Well, look, I think this has been.
I was going to really close my thought, but we're terrible sense makers, because our minds aren't equipped to process all the complexity of the world in which we're in, really, right? That would be my thesis. And so research is a way of helping us really discern, getting back to your point about confidence. How confident are we in our interpretation of reality? It's an epistemological question, right? And epistemology, for the listeners, is kind of the question of how do you determine what you know is correct? What is your theory of knowledge, and what is your theory of how you construct your understanding of the world, and how confident you are in your interpretation of it? And we live in a world right now where everyone seems to be super confident about the nature of reality when they shouldn't be. They should be humbled by the fact that we don't have the equipment to really understand the complexity of the world in which we live on any level. So, getting back to your point, we don't always need research, but research at the same time is very important.
Well, like I said, you should always be collecting data. That's a fact. So
that we can agree on.
So we can take our disagreement outside, though.
All right. I'll meet you. You're in Pittsburgh, right?
You can't. Come on, man. That's an Oregon state. That's literally in the middle of the P. I mean, you. All right, man. Put the glasses on. All right. Well, look. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. We hope this was neither boring nor a waste of your time. We'll assume that you've gleaned something out of this. I want to thank you for listening to us ramble, and hopefully, and I think we'll ramble a little more and take it away. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, and whatever platform, if you like this, whatever platform you are listening or watching on, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or whatever, please like the podcast. If you are on YouTube, there's a subscribe button. Click the like button so you'll see more of our videos as we release them. And if you're on one of the other podcasting platforms like Spotify or Apple or whatever, make sure to like and follow. And we'll have show notes in the description with links to websites and stuff like that. So thanks, and have a good day, folks.
Bye-bye.